In the last 100 years, video games have evolved from simple pixelated graphics to basically real life.
Hello there.
Which got me wondering how much horror games have changed since they were invented. See, I've never been a fan of horror movies, they scare me.
Just Scooby-Doo.
But video games, sign me up. So today, I'm playing one horror game from every decade, including some of the craziest games you've probably never heard of, to see exactly how horror games have changed. Starting in the 1970s. Now, the 1970s is where the horror game genre gets its start, with games like Hunt the Wampus and Haunted House laying the foundation for years to come. But nothing could have prepared the world for the most controversial horror game, 1976's Death Race. First impressions of this game? It's simple. Hey, get over here, you slippery little rascal. Now, for context, in the 70s, the scariest thing in the world was the Bermuda Triangle.
Wow. Scary.
The scariest movie took place on the ocean.
Wow. I don't like sharks.
And the scariest games were played on arcades like these for 50 cents a pop.
Nice. I like this more.
Which brings us back to Death Race. You see, in Death Race, you drive a car with the goal of running over as many gremlins, these are gremlins by the way, as you possibly can to score points. All while avoiding tombstones that will slow the ever-loving bejesus out of you. I don't know how anyone was scared about this game, like, all I see are simple shapes. But that's actually the other reason I'm here today. Because for the longest time, I told everyone I knew that no game had ever scared me. Hey, video games don't scare me.
Okay.
Movies, sure, but games? Not one. Then, this happened. Yeah. So I'm making it my goal to not get scared once playing any of the games by the end of this video, thus completely redeeming myself forever. Although for now, I think we can all agree that while Death Race is incredibly interesting to look back on, this game is way more fun than I thought it would be. I can't say that it's necessarily scary, so I'm going to give the 1970s a scare level of 1. But something tells me that the 80s has a big surprise waiting for us on the other side. Now, if the 70s started the horror game genre, the 80s was when developers locked the heck in on the gameplay, with a new, more advanced Haunted House game, Castlevania, 3D Monster Maze, and Sweet Home, which may or may not have had a giant influence on a game we're definitely going to talk about later.
Yo, what the heck? The start of this game just slaps!
But one game seems to have put Death Race's controversy completely to shame. I'm talking about 1988's Splatterhouse. Straight up, playing this in 1988 would have blown little baby Goose's mind, assuming I was alive back then. Also, I'm playing this game on the Switch because I couldn't find anywhere else to play it, legally. Now remember, at this time, the scariest thing in the world is the rise of satanic cults.
Oh my god. Johnny Storm?
The scariest movies come from the brand new slasher genre.
Oh. Machetes are cool.
And the scariest games are now played on home consoles like the TurboGrafx 16 for the low cost of an iPhone.
Ah, I see.
Now with a name like Splatterhouse, you'd think the goal would be splatting people in or around houses. But you'd be wrong, because this game is actually, apparently, a love story. You see, in Splatterhouse, you play as Rick, who's got to battle through wherever the heck this is by chopping down whatever the heck these are in half, all to save his loving girlfriend Jennifer, who's been taken captive by the evil Dr. West. Who knew Kanye had such a lucrative career before music? Now, apparently the scariest part of this game is this guy right here, Edward Chainsaw Hands. And while he definitely checks all the scary boxes, turns out the scariest parts of this game, for me at least, was what happens to poor Jennifer. Also, somehow, this chair. I hate this chair so much. But with only a 10-year difference from Death Race, I'm actually shocked just how much has improved. I gotta admit, the graphical bump from the 70s to the 80s is like insane. I mean, look at these two decades back to back. They look like they're from completely different planets. But even with possessed chairs on their side, the 80s was still far from scaring me. I mean, if anything, I think I felt more empowered thanks to Rick's killer baseball swing. The game nailed the reaction. Like when I hit someone with
A baseball bat? It's disgustingly satisfying.
So that being said, I think we give the 1980s a scare level of 2. Good job, 80s. Proud of you. Next up, one of the most influential decades in horror game history. But first, let's test out how much you guys actually know about horror games.
Did you know that horror games are responsible for the return of zombie movies in the 2000s? Welcome back to Touchgrass Trivia, the part of the show where I tell you 3 mind-blowing horror facts while also testing out Red Magic's Astra Gaming tablet in this spooky fall weather. Hopefully the neighbors don't mind. Fact number 1, the term survival horror was actually first coined by Resident Evil in 1996. The game was so unique it required an entirely brand new video game category, which is wild. Just not as wild as playing classic horror games on Red Magic's perfectly sized 9-inch display. Fact number 2, hardware limitations are technically responsible for one of history's most iconic horror games. You see, since the PlayStation was incapable of rendering levels in 1999's Silent Hill properly, developers decided to cover the game in fog to save processing power, accidentally creating one of the most popular atmospheres in video game history. And thanks to the insane processing power of this tablet, even newer games run on this puppy without a sweat. Fact number 3, 90s horror games were so good that they literally brought zombies back to Hollywood, inspiring movies like 28 Days Later, Dawn of the Dead, and what feels like 10,000 Resident Evil movies, which I can watch no problem thanks to this tablet's insane 8200 mAh battery. So if you want a tablet that runs games anywhere you want, any way you want, with a battery that seems to last forever, then click the link in my description to learn more. Now let's get back inside. I feel seen. Hi, Karen.
Guys, we're in the 1990s, and there's really no easy way to say this without sounding incredibly pretentious, so I'm just gonna go ahead and give it the old college try. The 90s literally defined horror games as we know it. There it is, that was my best shot. Seriously, without these games, Hollywood and even culture itself wouldn't be what it is today, with iconic horror games like Alone in the Dark, Clock Tower, and Silent Hill. But one game changed video games forever. 1996's Resident Evil.
Resident Evil.
Yo, what the heck? The start of this game just slaps.
Now remember, for context, the scariest thing in the world was that it was ending January 1st, 2000.
Wow, that is scary.
Scariest movies figured out seeing dead people was one heck of a twist.
Oh, neato.
And the scariest games could now be played entirely in 3D for $50 a pop.
Nice. This sparks joy.
Bringing us right back to Resident Evil. See, after you choose who you want to play as, Resident Evil just starts.
Oh my god, I had no idea Chris Redfield came from the first game. What the heck?
With probably the greatest intro I've ever seen running on a PlayStation. I mean, this is clearly some guy holding up a plastic zombie dog to the camera, and that's a 10 out of 10 performance right there.
Yeah, I'd run almost immediately.
Now, shortly after witnessing the 1990s puppetry, you and your team seek salvation in this brightly lit mansion. Why it's so bright, I will never know. But then the game just says, good luck, leaving you to figure out everything on your own, including what has to be the worst controls ever conceived.
Hold on. No, I wanted you to go down. A little bit of an issue here with the camera controls.
And it's glorious! The atmosphere, the graphics, the sound, the slow piecemeal story, it's all incredible, and we haven't even got to the gameplay yet. For context, if this was a modern game, we'd still be installing it, or if we're lucky, we'd be halfway through a tutorial getting exposition shoved down our throats with a pop-up for more microtransactions.
Featuring over 100 rewards.
But what's unique about Resident Evil is that it was the first to pioneer the now widely used survival horror game genre. See, while you're given weapons to defend against zombies and these disgustingly frustrating camera angles,
I see why people complained about these camera controls.
you're also given a series of clues for how to navigate the giant puzzle that becomes the mansion you're stuck in, causing you to search for the perfect item to store in your inventory in order to progress further while simultaneously avoiding people like John Zombie waiting around the corner.
Oh god, our first test. You don't want no smoke, dude.
Again, I'm just gonna put the previous decades beside each other because I'm telling you, these graphics were causing every 90s kid to lose their frickin' minds.
There's no pop-ups 24/7 telling you where to go. There's no nav point. It's just like, here's the mansion, figure it out. You're a smart guy. Some say you have great calves. I agree.
However, I gotta be honest with you guys, because while I'm definitely glazing the ever-loving bejesus out of this game, I'm still in no way, shape, or form whatsoever scared.
It's not the game's fault, but every time I hear the zombie moan, it makes me think of that scene in Shaun of the Dead.
That being said, John Zombie did get a lot closer than I would have liked.
Oh my god! It's fantastic.
Look, I think it's safe to say that Resident Evil is not only a fantastic game, it's also responsible for pushing the entire video game industry forward. With gameplay that's so revolutionary, it's still being used today. And while the jump scares, this guy's haircut, and or the zombie puppets didn't necessarily scare me, there's no question that Resident Evil and the 90s are on another frickin' level, giving me no choice but to give the 90s a scare level of 3. But if you loved what the 90s did to horror games, then I'm telling you, the 2000s are about to blow your frickin' mind. Guys, we're in the greatest decade not only for horror games, but video games in general. Seriously, pick any game, and I guarantee you there's a huge chance that it came from or was influenced by something made in the 2000s. Which I know, sounds like a crazy thing to say, but let me just list you some of the horror games that came out in this decade. Condemned, Eternal Darkness, Silent Hill 2, Resident Evil 4, Doom 3, FEAR, Dead Rising, Left 4 Dead, Bioshock, Manhunt, Darkwatch, Gears of War, and who could forget? SpongeBob SquarePants, Creature from the Krusty Krab. In fact, can we all just comment our favorite 2000s game to really send home the point to the non-believers? Because that'd really make my day. But while this decade definitely has a ton of competition, I think one of the most interesting games has to be 2008's Dead Space.
And just to make sure that this is extra scary, let's play it on hard.
Now, for context, the scariest thing at the time was an extraterrestrial corn obsession.
Yeah, relevant.
The scariest movies found new, albeit deadly ways to use Rube Goldberg machines.
Oh, God.
And the scariest games could now be played in high definition for a new price tag of $60.
Yay. I'm depressed.
Dude, the upgrade from the 90s is absolutely insane. This is just a little over 10 years of improvement. We were eating good.
You see, in Dead Space, you play as Isaac Clarke, who lands on the USG Ishimura to search for the crew who seem to have gone completely radio silent, which becomes a little bit more important to Isaac given that his girlfriend Nicole is on that very same ship. I pray she doesn't end up like Jennifer. Except what Isaac finds instead is something called a necromorph. Which it's basically just an uglier version of John Zombie that can only be killed after cutting off his limbs. It sounds more graphic than it is, but actually no, I take that back. It's incredibly graphic.
Well, John Necromorph. Nice try, John.
But there's actually two reasons I think that Dead Space is the most important horror game of the 2000s. First, Dead Space is the culmination of every decade's horror design decisions cranked right up to 11, with DNA from Resident Evil, Doom, and Fear inspiring the game's gameplay and spooky atmosphere.
I think that's one of the greatest things that people don't understand about Dead Space is how much respect it has for the player. It's not wasting your time, it's not training you, it's just throwing little natural pieces of informational nuggets to help you play better.
And these necromorphs? Well, they elevated the zombie trope in a new way that instantly creates tension. I mean, just look at this guy. He disgusts me. But the most important reason is that this is the first game to really go for a full immersive experience.
So because there's absolutely no HUD, what Dead Space had to do is effectively make sure that everything is color coordinated in such a way that you instantly understand what could be interacted with, what is a key piece of value information, how the doors work, everything.
You see, at this point, most video games displayed information that you needed on your screen at all times. They would do this through pop-ups, nav points, or ammo and health counters that would never go away. It was strictly information. Whereas in Dead Space, it was completely represented naturally through Isaac and how he moves, creating a game that kept you completely immersed for the first time ever.
Hopefully you guys are okay with me nerding out for this stuff. I just find it so interesting, and it's nice to be able to just talk about it forever.
And I think that's why the 2000s is arguably one of, if not the greatest decade in gaming history. Because back then, they didn't just make great games. That was kind of the norm. Instead, they continuously tested new ideas that pioneered the foundation every other game would use for years to come, with Dead Space specifically leading the charge on immersive gameplay.
Again, Dead Space is just taking years of horror games and condensing all of the lessons down to one amazing game. Clearly, I'm a fan.
Now, did Dead Space scare me? No, but it's definitely getting closer.
The only thing that's scaring me is my lack of hydration.
So, after careful review, I think I'm gonna give the 2000s a scare level of 4. Great job, 2000s. I love you. But this next decade takes everything we've learned so far and completely flips it on its head. And more importantly, it's the only decade where I can finally get redemption. Now, if I could be frank, this is probably my least favorite decade of all time. And the reason is simple. 99% of the things people hate about video games these days, well, they all started here. But when it comes to horror games, there's no denying that this decade is an incredibly special one. With games like Amnesia, Outlast, Five Nights at Freddy's, Soma, and who could forget, Halo 5. Yeah, that one kept a lot of kids up at night. Heck, some of these games are even responsible for some of YouTube's biggest creators.
Where did he go? Down the toilet? No!
But one thing you'll notice from all these horror games is that they all double down on one new technique. A hyper focus on being hunted by something or someone in a confined space, giving one game everything it needed to scare me. 2014's Alien Isolation. Now, for context, in this decade, the scariest thing in the world is the ironic rise of politics.
Oh, yeah, it's not wrong.
Scariest movies started coming out of the minds of comedians.
Ooh, I like Key and Peele.
And the scariest games were now played on PCs due to the insane sales that seem to happen every other day.
Nice.
Bringing us right back to the game that changed the way my wife looks at me.
It is so apparent that this game is using everything it can in its toolbox to create tension.
Which is exactly how Alien Isolation works, putting you up against my arch nemesis, John Alien, who's actually a lot smarter than you might think. Because in Alien Isolation, John is given the ability to watch and learn how you play in order to adapt, causing him to appear when you least expect him.
Sweet Mary, Mother, and Josephine. Alright, I know I talked a big game, but I'm incredibly uncomfortable right now. And this is not a bit, even though it could very well be a bit. I don't like how he moved. And I don't like the music. But I also...
Now, one of the coolest things about Alien Isolation is that it takes place in the same world as the Alien movies it's based on.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
In fact, you actually play as Sigourney Weaver's daughter 15 years after the second best Alien movie, with the first obviously being the one the Canadian made. And yes, I'm biased, and also yes, that's okay. But regardless of where you fall, there's really no denying that this game nails the original movie's vibe.
Stop helping!
We got old school computers, punch cards meant for saving your game, and they even got what I can only describe as Elon's ultimate dream utopia.
Oh my God!
Seriously, Elon, chill on the robot thing, okay? You're scaring me. But remember, if I'm ever gonna redeem myself from this, then I got no choice but to confront Jonathan directly without screaming, facing my fears once and for all, and hopefully saving my marriage in the process. The only problem? I haven't seen him for hours.
Holy.
So, I guess we're just gonna have to wait. And while we wait, I figured I'd tell you more about myself and why talking about video games is so important to me. See, growing up, I lived in a small town with parents who worked 24/7 just to get by. Back then, we really didn't have much, and what's worse is I lived far away from everyone I knew. Meaning after school, my life was pretty lonely. But every Saturday, my parents made sure to always bring my brother and I to Blockbuster, where each of us could choose one game to rent for the rest of the week, leading me to fall in love with not only video games, but how they'd evolve year over year. Except these days, all that stuff is now gone, and I think that's a pretty big bummer. So I decided to share everything I've been lucky enough to learn with you guys through these videos, because it's my dream to make video games more fun, more accessible, and more importantly, more positive for everyone to enjoy. And thanks to all of your support, I've been able to spend the last 4 years learning how to make these videos bigger and better than ever before. So before Jonathan spoils the moment, I just want to take a second to say thanks for giving a small town Canadian kid the opportunity to try. Now, marital threats aside, since I'd spent so long avoiding Jonathan, I basically started becoming a stealth god. I mean, you'd have to get up pretty early in the morning to catch me off guard. In fact, just look at how nimble I am here.
No. No, no, no. No, no, no. Jonathan?
Two things. Number one, I hate Jonathan more than he'll ever know. And number two, I didn't scream. Which can only mean one thing. I've finally redeemed myself. And more importantly, I've made great strides towards repairing the spark that keeps my marriage intact. Today was a good day. And since this decade no longer scares me, I can't exactly justify a scare level of 5. So instead, I'm going to be giving the 2010s 4 out of 5 ghosts. However, I wish I could say I was out of the woods, because with 2 of the scariest decades remaining, there's a really high chance I not only get scared, but witness a level of fear of which I've never experienced before.
What is that?
It's definitely not foreshadowing at all. Now, even though we're only halfway through this decade, there's no denying that the 2010s is an absolute insane year for horror games. And in a way that's completely unfair to the other decades. Because now there's better technology, more knowledge, and more importantly, 50 years of horror game lessons to pull from, leading to a brand new form of multiplayer experience that takes the world by storm. But of all these games, it's my belief that the most interesting one is none other than 2020's Phasmophobia.
Look at that. The scariest thing in the entire game so far. A Eula.
Now, as I'm sure you're all very well aware, the scariest thing in this decade was learning just how fast everything can be turned upside down.
It felt like forever.
Scariest movie is anything Marvel made post-Endgame.
Boo. I like Spider-Man.
But unlike the previous decades, the scariest games can now be fully experienced in virtual reality.
Nice. That's a lizard.
Now, while this area's huge innovation is definitely the inclusion of playing with your friends, I'm gonna play Phasmophobia in virtual reality completely by myself.
Okay, so first impressions. I got hands. I can close them. I have what looks like a walkie-talkie.
Now, the goal in Phasmophobia is actually very simple. Your goal is to enter an abandoned house and record a ghost encounter using any one of these tools at your disposal, all while doing your best to avoid a drop in sanity.
Well, what the heck? That's the most my light does?
However, Phasmophobia goes further than any other horror game we've played so far, allowing you to use a microphone to speak directly to the undead simply by saying its name. And for my case file, the ghost I was hunting was apparently named Ronald.
Ronald West responds to people who are alone. Well, that'd be it.
Which I did find a bit odd. I don't know, he just kind of feels more like a John to me. Regardless, the effect clearly works.
Ronald, Ronald.
Now, I want to be crystal clear here. The main thing we've seen from each decade is a growth in complexity, but after the 2010s, it surprisingly starts to reverse. In fact, what I'm playing right now might be one of the simplest games I've ever played, because most of what I'm doing is just walking around, turning on lights, and yelling the name Ronald.
Ronald. Ronald. Ronald. Ronald.
Yeah, I can only imagine what's going through my neighbor's head at this point. But while no other decade has scared me so far, I'm starting to get the sense this decade is going to be different. And while it's not easy to see, I'm not doing as well as I initially thought.
And what's crazy is, like, even though this is just a video game, this is a virtual world, I can actually feel the fight or flight in my body tingling. And yeah, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. It makes me want to fight a guy.
You see, while nothing has happened besides a few lights shutting on or off and a few odd sounds here or there, I was so beyond my comfort level in a way I absolutely didn't see coming.
All right, let's just take a deep breath real quick. The old 1-2. What in God's name was that?
Because thanks to this headset, I was completely and utterly immersed in an abandoned house, which is a weird feeling that I've never experienced before. In fact, as much as I hate to say it, what you're seeing right now is 100% genuine fear.
Ronald. Ronald. Yeah, I already got the lights, Ronald. This guy's a funny guy. Come on, turn on. You stupid little rat. Won't lie, guys, at this point, I don't even want to play this. This is why I don't watch horror movies. This is why. Because it's just, who wants to be in this feeling? Ronald!
Remember, nothing I see is real. This is just a set of zeros and ones masking as a game. And yet, I'm shaking with rage. I've suddenly stopped talking. My defensive form of jokes and sarcasm has completely gone quiet. And most importantly, my body's fight or flight has completely taken over me.
Ronald, you
Sorry, Ronald. Look, I wish I could tell you I ran into Ronald and confronted him. I wish I could tell you I made it through this entire video without any form of fear. But the honest truth is, I didn't. You see, up until now, I always hated scary movies. Yet at the same time, I somehow enjoyed scary games. And I could never explain why any of that made any sense. Till now. Because there's no denying it. These horror games somehow taught me something about myself I never even considered. Because it turns out, the thing I'm most afraid of is losing control. This is by far the scariest decade I've ever experienced, but I want you to remember one thing. Video games are an incredibly new form of entertainment, meaning everything we know today is only the tip of the iceberg. Because with only 50 years, we've seen these games go from pixels to simple slashers to 3D worlds and now entirely new virtual realities, each becoming more immersive and, more importantly, scarier with every decade. Yeah,
That's crazy. I didn't think the game would affect me as much as it did.
But what happens when you move that clock not 10 years, not 20 years, but 50 years into the future? See, while we can't know for sure what'll happen in 50 years, we've already seen just how dramatic 10 years of innovation can already be, causing the scariest thing in the world to most likely be whatever we create. The scariest movies are most likely just a prompt away, and the scariest games, well, they might just be the ones you forget you're playing.
Hey, do you want to watch Scooby-Doo 17?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Thanks for watching. Future, we're in the future. Whoa, we do future dances. We got future pumpkins, future couches, no color besides the pumpkin. Future. Subscribe.